actually haven't looked through this book yet, so this will be a first time look with you at the same time. I know they're usually full of really lovely photographs and illustrations such as this one. Now I'm trying to get the lighting right because some of the pages in these books are quite shiny, so apologies is the deserts, plains, low mountains. So the centre is often called the red centre because of the predominant colour of its sands. This region, the heart of the outback, is crisscrossed by the channels of rivers that seldom flow, and dotted by lake beds that hardly ever fill. Here and there the plains of the centre are studded by monolithic rocky outcrops and ancient mountains, including the McDonnell and Musgrave ranges with their deep gorges and undulating ridges. So let's see, down here we have Albany, Perth and Fremantle, Geraldton, Indian Ocean is on the left hand side, Broome at the top, this is Darwin and the Timor Sea, and then on the east the Coral Sea, Pacific Ocean. Here is Brisbane and Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne right at the bottom. This is the Tasman Sea. Oh, and Alice Springs right in the middle. Right, so let's start by reading this first chapter, Beyond the Black Stump. The little orange and cream-coloured aeroplane climbed up from Sydney and swung away from the east coast of the Australian Highland continent, away from the foaming lemonade surf exploding on long golden beaches, the drill squads of volunteer lifesavers wheeling and stamping in the sand like so many soldier crabs. It was December, the summer month when Australians flocked to the edges of their land, brown bodies massed in mute worship of the sea. We were heading away from them all on a 1,000-mile journey inland, the aircraft already bumping and jerking so much in their columns of heat that the very air seemed palpable. We were thrusting back through time to the ancient heart of the continent, ridges where high, silvery waterfalls spilled into shady pools, some of which harbour one of Australia's oddest mammals, the egg-laying, milk-producing dog-billed platypus. Below us the slopes levelled out to merge with the inland plain. In the early 19th century the plain had been forested. The stands of trees interrupted succession of seas, but the ancient seabed over which he travelled had been laid bare more than 60 million years ago. Now, even the rivers of the outback flow only after the rare wet spells and soon trickle away into salt-encrusted marshes or peter out among desert sand dunes. The longest river, the 1,750-mile Darling, came into view beneath one wing. It was no more than a chain of fast-drying lakes stained by the salty dyes of the earth. Beyond the river, there were no towns, only a few isolated homesteads. These homesteaders live beyond the Black Stump, a mythical place celebrated in Australian folklore as the gateway to the outback. Their way of life conveys an idea of the immensity of the outback. The homesteaders' children are not taught locally. They attend the School of the Air, based at Broken Hill, where teachers using two-way radios broadcast lessons to pupils scattered over 500,000 square miles of Queensland, New South Wales and South Australia. The most distant child lives more than 450 miles from his classroom. Each day, before school begins, a Strauss waltz gaily wafts advanced placental mammals, which evolved mainly in the northern continents, did not reach Australia until much later. Thus, the continent's marsupials were able to evolve and diversify in ecological niches from which, in other lands, they were soon ousted. As Australia drifted slowly northwards, its climate changed. About 6 to 11 million years ago, a large ice cap formed in the Antarctic. Sea level fell as water was taken up from the oceans and added to the ice. Cap. And the temperature of the Southern Ocean around Australia dropped. Then came the great ice ages of the Pleistocene. As the atmosphere cooled, the winds became stronger over Australia, increasing evaporation. Inland lakes dried up, the vegetation of central Australia withered, and sand dunes shaped by the strong winds were formed. Out of such dynamic change had come the landscape over which Alison was now piloting us. During that period, Australia drifted close to its present position near the southeast tip of Asia. Placental mammals gained a foothold on the continent, reaching it by island, stepping stones, or via a land bridge that perhaps temporarily connected the two land masses. Bats and rodents streamed into Australia. Finally, Aboriginal man arrived from Asia more than 40,000 years ago. Later waves of immigrants brought with them a semi-domesticated dog, the dingo, which, running wild, became Australia's largest land predator of today. One of the immigrants from Asia was a tiny freshwater fish, the desert hardyhead. It was discovered as recently as 1967 in a hot spring oasis called Dalhousie Springs on the southwest corner of the Simpson Desert, about 75 miles north of the township of Oodnadatta. Hardyheads are not much to look at. Diddlers, 2.5 inches long, of the sort fishermen use as bait. However, their significance is far greater than their size. They are found nowhere else in Australia. Their closest relatives live in New Guinea. How they got to the centre, no one knows for certain. They may have been transported as eggs, clinging in the legs of birds. When the rivers of the centre dried up, they were stranded at Dalhousie. For me, the desert hardyheads symbolise the tenacity of life in the outback, and so when I planned my journey, I decided that my first goal would be the hot pools at Dalhousie Springs. After refuelling at Broken Hill, Alison piloted our aeroplane northwest over terrain that became grimmer with every passing mile. The grey-green carpet of mulga scrub frayed to an end, and was succeeded by corrugated pink sand ridges daubed with clumps of spinifex grass. Red willies, spiralling columns of dust whipped up by the wind, danced across the desert. Soon we were crossing one of the driest parts of Australia, the Lake Eyre Basin, which receives a scant 5 inches of rain a year. Far away on the eastern horizon, we could see a strip of land that looked like an with skulls